Hi guys, it's Rebecca Mary here and welcome back to another video. For today's video I have a speed paint for you guys. This speed paint is done in watercolor. Later I go in with gouache, and then I also use my Pental pocket brush pen to add ink lines, but that's at the very end. So for my inspiration for this piece, it kind of came about in a roundabout way. I currently live in a situation that's not ideal to me. Probably a lot of you guys can sympathize with that. And so I was thinking about, I would love to live in, this little cabin kind of somewhere in the woods, and I could just have these huge windows and, sit by them and paint and have birds come and eat it on my hand. I don't know. But yeah, kind of like this fairy tale thing. So I decided to draw a little cabin, and then from there it kind of turned into this more fantasy world that I decided to paint. And I wanted it to be like ice, like a ice type cavern maybe. So hopefully that comes across as ice. So yeah, painting this was really interesting because I've never tried to paint ice before, but I was just trying to add up lots of layers, make sure to have lots of highlights so you could tell where the light would hit it to make it look like ice. Also, I used these more vibrant blues for ice because I was thinking about like glaciers ice. They have a much more blue ice instead of what we think of as like our ice cubes, which are pretty much just kind of like a frosted white ice. So I went with this blue ice color. And this was a lot of fun to paint. These colors, I never use these colors in such vibrancy, so it was really fun to just lay down these bright blues and see what happened. So here I am just adding some more layers, and then I'm taking a brush that has no paint on it and then sliding it over top of the wet paint on the paper to kind of pick up some highlights. And I'm still just, adding layers on top, and this was a really fun thing to paint. I enjoyed it a lot. I don't do a lot of, I do some landscape things, but I don't do any fantasy landscapes because this isn't based off of anything real. This all just came from my head and what I was thinking. So I don't do a lot of those, and it was really fun to do, and I think it turned out pretty well. The one trouble I had with this was I wanted to make sure it felt like the light was coming in from that back and it was kind of shining through, and I wanted it to look like maybe the corners of the ice that were in the middle were kind of highlighted. So here I'm trying to add darks up against the corners to kind of define them, and then I decided later to go in with some yellow, which I don't use any yellow besides that in the painting. To look at like the sunlight is reflecting off of it. And here I am just adding the trees now. I think I had some trouble with this part. I wanted it to have the same color scheme, but I wanted the trees to stand out, and I wasn't liking exactly how the colors were going. So I hadn't originally planned to use gouache in this piece, but I wanted some of the more foreground hills and the tree and the cabin to kind of stand out a little bit more, so I ended up going over a lot of those parts in gouache to kind of bring them forward and make them stand out a little bit more. So at this point I hadn't planned to do that. That was something I kind of just did later on. And you can see when I did that back tree, whenever I add some color to it, I end up taking my I was using a rag and just blotting it to make it look like it was faded in the background to kind of blend it in with the whole thing, so it wasn't like this stark tree up in the back. And now I'm going in and doing the cabin. Again, I wanted to keep kind of the same color scheme, so I'm using a lot of blues with my brown. I think it turned out pretty well, this cabin. I didn't really like the way it looked before I added the gouache. I mean, it looked okay, but there was no real defining edge, and I think that's something I struggle with in my watercolors. Here you can see I'm using the yellow on the corners up there. In watercolors, I struggle making things look more defined, because watercolor is a little bit harder to control than some other mediums. So I use a lot of pen with my watercolor, which is fine, and I like the way it looks, but I just wanted to try to do it without pen, and so I decided to go in with gouache, which I am using now in that front little foreground piece. I decided to go in with gouache to kind of define it a little bit more, to make it a little bit more noticeable. Something else I really enjoy about this piece is I kind of just went for it. I knew I was filming myself and I knew I wanted to put this up, but I wasn't pressuring myself to put out a perfect piece, or to be like, oh, I started with watercolor, I have to finish it, or oh, I shouldn't add this. I really wasn't worried about it, so it was really nice to kind of just to let go and do whatever I thought would make the piece look better, which is what I did, and I think that worked out for me in the end. So as you can see, adding the gouache really kind of defines those areas and adds a lot more depth to the piece, because now those are so in focus and up front, and everything else is a little bit more blurry, and it really pushes the background into the background. And I didn't use any references for this, which, looking back on it, I wish I had looked up a piece like pictures of ice or something to kind of get the texture of it, or to get what happens when light hits it, but I didn't use anything. I kind of just went for it. So in the future, I think I would look up pictures of ice. There's some really cool photography of ice, and I think I would have done that if I were to do this over again. So here I am going in with the Pental pocket brush pen and just adding the ink lines to define it even more. I only add the ink lines to the front, pretty much the places that I added the gouache to. Again, just to define it and make it stand out a little bit more. So this video is pretty much over now. I'm just adding the last little parts. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed making this piece. It was a lot of fun. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe, or you can like this video to let me know. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.